One of the most urgent tasks of our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and this is the best day of the week. Not just because the weekend is almost here, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely, Executive Vice President of the Heartland Institute and the host of this here program. The Heartland Institute is an organization that has been around for 41 years, and we are known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth that counters the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time live. And also like, share, and subscribe. And be sure to leave comments underneath this video. All of these very easy actions convince YouTube's mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program. And that gets the program in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not really approve of the way we cover climate and energy policy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS for the Climate Realism Show. And you can join other friends of this program that help us bring it to the world every single week. And before we get started, we want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and Heartland UK Europe. We have a very big show today, lots to talk about, so let's get started. We have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the most viewed website on climate change in the world, What's Up With That? Sterling Burnett, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is also moonlights as the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center for Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute, and Linnea Lueken, Research Fellow for Energy and Environmental Policy at Heartland. And of course, as always, Andy Singer, our producer behind the scenes, making sure the show looks and flows great. And we are very happy to welcome back to the show a good friend, Myron E. Bell. He's of the American Lands Council, formerly the longtime head of environment and energy policy at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. And Myron was the head of the EPA transition team during Trump's first term. We are so looking forward to your insights today, Myron, with all the stuff we have to cover. I will take that nod as a very enthusiastic, let's get started.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Yeah, actually, before we came on air, I'll just share this with the audience. Sterling and Myron have known each other for a very long time and have been in this game of countering climate alarmism and bringing climate truth for many decades. So it's kind of an old home week for you two when both of you are on the show. All right.
Sterling's younger than I am.
Well, that goes without saying. All right, let's get started as we always do.
Me? Did I freeze or did everybody else freeze? Was it me or what?
It was you, Sterling.
See, I said you being the oldest was never in question. All right, at least your connection is old and your computer is old, so that
my connection is great. We tested.
All right, no excuses then. All right, let's get rolling. We got a lot to cover. We like to start with the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. Maybe one day when the entirety of the climate alarmist scam is put into history, maybe Bill will come on this program one day. We can always dream. All right, our first item I've titled Little Carbon Paw Prints. And this comes from the Associated Press. This is a story we've had to cover on this show quite a few times. The headline is, Pets Contribute to Greenhouse Gases Like Us. Here's how to reduce their carbon paw print. Again, yes, again, the green weenies will simply not give up on trying to get you to feel guilty about having a pet. Let me read a little bit from here. One of the most climate-intensive decisions we make is whether to own a pet. It is for the same reason that humans have a big impact. They eat every day, and most of them eat meat. The environmental impact of meat includes the land the animal lived on, the food it ate, the waste it generated, and other factors. Quote, what else do pets do? We have to feed them. I think that's why it's number one, unquote, said Allison Resser, Director of Sustainability and Innovation at the Pet Sustainability Coalition. There's a cool group. But just like people, a pet's impact on the planet can vary greatly depending upon their diet. Now, in this story, the big problem, they say, is that giving human-grade food, I'm sure you've seen commercials about that on TV, to your pet is just getting more popular. And of course, that has to be a problem for the climate. Billy Nicholas, a pet food researcher with Bryant Research, said the trend of using human-grade meat in pet food increases its climate impact because pets aren't just eating animal parts that would have otherwise gone unused. Quote, we definitely can't dismiss these impacts altogether by just saying these are the offcuts. These are environmentally negligible, he said. All right, that's enough of that. Linnea, I think last time we hit this subject, I went to you first. And all of us on this show, I don't know if I can speak for Myron, but all of us here have pets. None of us are going to stop being pet owners because of green guilt. But again, I think this is even more proof that the climate cult will find no source of joy in your life that they will not try to crush.
That's right. They're oppressive little cranks, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, look, whether or not, it's just like with almost every other policy that they pursue. This isn't really about climate change. This is about they're opposed in general to pet ownership. This is probably being driven, and I'm not going to say this with certainty because I didn't look it up, but my guess is this is being mostly spearheaded by people who are animal rights activist types in the first place. They might not prefer that you give them dry food in general, but if they can discourage people from pet ownership in totality, that would be their end goal here. The last time that we covered this particular issue, I think that was the point that they were trying to make, is that you shouldn't have carnivorous pets because they are too hard on climate, of course, because they eat beef and chicken and fish and everything. So yeah, no, it's all getting stupider and stupider every single day.
They're right. I've decided to give up my dogs and own cows instead. That will solve the climate problem, I'm sure. You know, look,
like every good Texan, Sterling, you got to own cows.
Got to own.
I mean,
cows.
I don't doubt that their accounting is right. That there are more carbon dioxide or methane emissions associated with, look at those dogs, they're so cute, with feeding your dog like steaks and stuff or like really nice things compared to like leftovers.
I do dispute it. I do dispute it. You look, if I'm feeding them steaks, the stuff that normally goes into dog food, dry dog food, is not being used. It's going somewhere else. So we're still getting dry dog food. I'm not feeding it, but we're also feeding them steaks that we would be eating. The problem is, and I did the calculations last time we covered this story. So livestock emissions are about 3% of all emissions in the U.S. All farm emissions are 6%. But livestock alone is 3%. The amount that they say, their numbers say, comes from from feeding pets is 18% or 3%. So it's negligible. You can't measure it. The impact is minimal. And I'm not going to give up my dog for something that cannot truly be measured and will have no impact on warming or not. You know, even if humans were having the impact on warming that they claim, which of course we dispute, this doesn't count. It can't be the impact on future temperatures can't be measured. And these people are just haters. And in particular, they hate pet ownership. They hate, actually they hate humans. They want to suck the joy out of everyone's lives. They're scolds that want to tell you how to live, and how you should live is with a hair shirt, shivering in the winter, sweating in the summer, having no joy of pets, having no children. We got to reduce population. I don't know why anybody, I don't know why the press would cover this. I don't know why anyone would take them seriously. They should not be allowed in polite company. They
All right, then.
They certainly won't be at my holiday dinner table.
All right. That's one of your best rants ever, Sterling.
There you go.
All right. You know, it's they're just joyless vegetarians is how I view it. They just don't want you to be different than them. You know, they believe that they are the way. Their way of life is the way to save the planet and save everyone. And we don't need more people. We don't need more pets. We don't need meat. You know, we're fine living on tofu and roots and berries and all that good stuff. So they just expect everybody else to do the same too. Like you say, they suck the joy out of life. And we've spent a lot of.
But it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
True. But the bottom line is when you look at the data, and here's a graph that can show you the data about livestock, since livestock are the main source for meat. You know, it just for cattle, you know, beef, it's what's for pets dinner, is just 2% of the U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. And that's an estimate, you know. Like Sterling says, you can't measure the impact. It's negligible. But, you know, it's just another joy-sucking cause they have, and that's it. That's all you can do about it.
I mean, Myron, do you own a pet? Do you have any pets? I know you're coming to us from your undisclosed location somewhere in Oregon, where you might have room for an animal or two.
Well, I come from a cattle ranching family, and we still own some grazing property, which we lease to a younger cattle rancher. We have currently two cats, and if anybody would like one of them, stop by. One or both of them. One's named Trouble. And we have two, we've always had border collies, and we now have two new border collie puppies. So, yes.
All right. Okay. Well, we are ready to move on to our next. Well, everybody's grabbing all their animals while they still can.
Before they do,
camera.
The dog I will not forego for climate change.
Max.
It ain't happening.
Well, my cat Frankie was bothering the heck out of me all morning, and now he's taking a nap, so he's unavailable for camera work. But all right. Well, to all you pet lovers out there, well,
you want a treat? Would you like a treat? Yeah? Sorry, I can't get you one right now.
We are busy. Oh, animal stars. All right. We'll go on to our next item here, but thank you, everyone. I have titled this one, Antarctic Ice Baby. Producer Andy actually alerted us to this one and thought we might cover it this week. This comes from CNN. Antarctic glacier saw the fastest retreat in modern history. It could spell trouble for sea levels, report finds. Or maybe not. I guess we'll see. I'll read from this for us. An Antarctic glacier shrunk by nearly 50% in just 2 months. The fastest retreat recorded in modern history, according to a new study, and the way it retreated could have big implications for global sea level rise. The Victoria Glacier, roughly the size of Philadelphia, is on the Antarctic Peninsula, a spindly chain of mountains sticking off the continent like a thumb pointing toward South America. It's one of the fastest warming regions on Earth. Grounded glaciers like Victoria, which rest on the seabed and do not float, generally retreat no more than a few hundred meters a year. But between November and December of 2022, Victoria retreated by 5 miles, according to the new study published Monday in the journal Nature Geoscience. They identified several steps that led to Victoria's rapid retreat. In 2011, the bay filled with fast ice, stabilizing the glaciers around it, allowing them to advance into the bay and form thick, floating ice tongues. In 2022, this fast ice broke out of the bay, destabilizing the glaciers, causing them to lose their ice tongues and retreat. This kind of ice plain melting has happened before. Models show that between about 15,000 and 19,000 years ago, during a period of warming that ended the last ice age, glaciers with ice plains retreated hundreds of meters per day. But, quote, we hadn't seen it play out live before, certainly not at this rate. As climate change accelerates, the story, of course, says, quote, we are likely to see more reductions of sea ice in this region, said Beth Ann Davies, a glacial geologist at Newcastle University, who was not involved in the study. This could result in other glaciers losing the sea ice that currently buttresses them, she told CNN. Anthony, I want to start here with you. I think it's important to cover these sorts of stories because they tend to try to impose panic upon the unsuspecting public who don't know these things as well. And of course, CNN says climate change was responsible for this, and supposedly that we are driving it. But as our friends Steve Malloy and Chris Martz said on X this week, Antarctica has not warmed for 50 years. And even this story points out that this is part of a natural cycle.
Yeah. And plus that, they say, oh, it's the size of Philadelphia. Well, big deal. So what? Compare the size of Philadelphia to the total size of all the ice on Antarctica. It's not even a blip. It's not even a speck of dust on my pinky. It just, the fact that we can observe these things now by satellite, which we couldn't do 40 years ago, puts everybody in a tizzy. Oh, look, something happened. Oh, gosh. Back then when the explorers were tracking around in Antarctica, they would say, look, there's some ice breaking up. It just, they go from immediate observation to panic because they have the ability to do so and assign, climate change to it. There's never a time when something like this happens in modern history when they don't assign climate change to it in some way, shape, or form somewhere. Somebody will see some change in the planet, no matter how small or minuscule, like this thing, and say, climate change, that's what did it. Darn those oil companies, nasty people. Stop eating meat, all that, because they just want to make you be like them. They want you to follow their lead because they are in total belief that they are doing the right thing for the future, when in fact, them doing what they think is the right thing has absolutely no effect. And, I used to track Antarctic sea ice and Arctic sea ice on a regular basis on What's Up at That in its early days, and people would get into giant arguments about it. And then after looking at it for a few years, I decided, you know what? This is just madness. We're just tracking little wiggles going on. Yeah. One year it's a little higher, one year it's a little lower. Bottom line is, it never fell off the cliff like they predicted it would back when Al Gore started talking about it in 2005 in Inconvenient Truth. Sea ice has not fallen off a cliff. And if you go to climateataglamps.com and look at the sections we have on Antarctic sea ice, you will see just how minuscule the melt that they talk about. And in this case, it wasn't even melt. It was a breakup of an ice shelf. That's different than melt. Ice cracks, it goes out to sea. That's what it does. They calve. So, you can look at it and see that there's just a tiny amount of loss each year compared to the whole thing. And ice, whether it's Arctic or Antarctic, is a renewable resource. It goes back every year. Some years not as much, some years more. It's no big deal.
Yeah. Sterling, you want to jump in?
Yeah. First, I'd like to say Anthony needs his own miter because he filled in as the deacon or the priest of Ranterbury there. But my thought is this. The story contains its own refutation. Sea ice formed massively, blocking the glacier retreat. Well, sea ice doesn't block glacial retreats. In fact, if the glaciers, melted, it would just push the sea ice out. But it formed during a time when we had global warming already. So the sea ice formed during global warming. Temperatures down there, contrary to the story, are not rising faster than the globe as a whole. In the Arctic, they are, but not in Antarctica. In addition, West Antarctica and the peninsula are affected by subsurface geothermal activity, subsurface volcanoes that helps melting. Sea ice itself does not displace water, so you're not getting sea level rise from that. And Antarctica is actually gaining ice. In East Antarctica and the mainland, the center of the continent, which are the vast bulk of the continent, the small rump, West Antarctica and the peninsula, are where you're losing ice due to largely subsurface volcanic activity, but not temperature change. And certainly, when you look at history, as the article itself, like I said, it refutes itself. 15,000 years ago, it did the same thing. It was doing even faster. Now, I don't recall how many automobiles were around 50,000 years ago, or coal-fired power plants. I wasn't around then, but I suspect not many.
Well, you're not paying attention to Sterling. There were lots of aliens flying around with UFOs at that time, creating methane and stuff, right?
Okay, well, that's my bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and people also, rightly, they don't even think about the amount of ice that is covering an entire continent full of ice. And no matter how much ice that they say that you're seeing calve off or go like that, it's so minuscule. It's not even. It's like the flea on an elephant. The amount of ice that they're supposedly losing in a given year. It's incomprehensible of how much ice is in Antarctica. So that also has to be kept in perspective. All right,
but the perspective should be it's not losing ice.
Well, true.
It's gaining. It's not losing, and it's
right.
gaining. So this one glacier is not indicative of the whole continent.
I still think that for our upcoming next climate conference, we should import some ice from Greenland or Antarctica to serve in drinks, just to spite these people.
Cruel. That's cruel. All right. We got a lot to get to. Let's move on to our next item here. This is another continuing story we cover here on the Climate Realism Show. Climate grifters got a grift, man. And this comes from The Guardian of all places. Another reason why I brought it up, hard left, commie, alarmist publication, The Guardian UK. Headline, only 3% of international climate aid going to transitioning communities. And a quote from the story is, "This is absurd. You don't say." This is really something. Let's get into it. Less than 3% of international aid to slash carbon emissions is supporting a, quote, just transition for workers and communities away from polluting industries, according to a new report. Released 1 week before the start of major United Nations climate negotiations in Belém, Brazil, the analysis from the climate and development nonprofit Action Aid warns that the world's response to the climate crisis risks deepening inequality rather than addressing it. It also reveals, quote, a hidden reason that we've not seen climate action at scale, unquote, said Teresa Anderson, the organization's global climate justice lead. You don't say. Wow. All right. The report authors analyzed publicly available information on every approved carbon mitigation focused project being financed by the world's two major multilateral climate funds, 178 from the UN-backed Green Climate Fund and 466 from the Climate Investment Funds, which were established by the World Bank and regional development banks. Then they assessed the nearly 650 projects against a set of indicators using a computer program that was then fact-checked by hand. Criteria included whether or not a project demonstrating meaningful participation from workers, women, and affected communities, promoted systemic shifts away from fossil fuels and highly polluting industrial agriculture, incorporated plans for reskilling or livelihood support, and of course, also addressed inequality. Just 1 in 50 of the approved projects met the just transition qualifications, the authors found. A, quote, jaw-droppingly low figure, they wrote. Jaw-droppingly low. Myron, I really want to get your perspective on this because you have been in this game for a long time. I, for one, am not shocked that the Green Climate Fund is actually a big scam and not going to those affected by climate change, but is actually just apparently ending up in the pocket of the global climate grifters.
Well, that's absolutely right, Jim. I think the key sentence you read was it was released the week before the UN global warming powwow starts in Brazil, COP30. And the science stuff about Antarctica, and there will be many in the next few days. They always, these are just scientists. They're totally objective, but their reports always come out right before the UN powwow. The Green Climate Fund was created to be a scam, and it is. And it's even the grants that go to the the socially just grants are a scam as well. They're all a scam. The question is why aren't we getting more? And I'm sure that the people from poor countries will be asking that. Why is the big money not going to us? Because that's what they thought the Green Climate Fund was going to do. It was going to transfer money from the first world to the third world. So the United States, the Congress has never appropriated any money for the Green Climate Fund, and President Obama just netted some out of a State Department account, which was supposed to go to for disasters, helping with pay for disaster aid in poor countries like floods or droughts or something. Trump said no to the Green Climate Fund. Biden put money back into it, or tried to, again, taking money that wasn't appropriated by Congress for this purpose. And now Trump has said we're getting rid of it. So I think we can feel pretty good in the United States that we're not part of this scam.
I looked at not this report, but earlier reports that did the accounting on where this stuff is being spent. And, the thing that strikes me from this report and the earlier reports is that they're asking for larger amounts of money, saying we're not funding it enough, but they can't show, in many instances, they don't even account for it all. There's large swaths of the funding that has no accounting, no modern accounting standards to show you where the money's spent and what the result has been. In a company, you would be arrested for fraud if that occurred. The IRS would come down on you, not when the UN does it. And so they have no national, no universally or even nationally accepted accounting standards for how this stuff is spent. When they've looked at it, they find it's spent on some things that have just literally nothing to do with climate change. It's spent on resorts on islands. Well, we're so worried that we're going to sink. Let's build a hotel on the coast. That makes sense. It's spent on expanding Italian gelato shops in various countries, or let's make a romance in the jungle in Argentina. That's where some climate funding went. That's certainly mitigation and going to help poor countries in developing fend off the worst results of climate change. These are the kinds of things. And so then they ask for more and more. And, my thought is this, look, even people who get fooled by Nigerian prince scams. Oh, send me money and I'll put you 10% of it in your bank account. Just give me your bank account. They learn. But the climate grifters hope that we never learn. And every time it comes up, they commit more money to it. But they commit. Here's the key. I think even the climate, the governments that supposedly fear climate change and think we should be funding this, even they sort of learn because they make higher commitments, but then they never meet the commitments they make. So it's like, oh, it's window dressing. We're going to help you. And, you go to the homeless guy on the street and you say, oh, we need to do something about you. Here's $1. That doesn't get him off the street. And next year you say, oh, I'm going to double my giving. Oh, so you get $2? Fantastic. It's madness. No, it's not madness. Trump called it a scam. He called it a hoax. And that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. UNICEF all over again.
Yep. I came to the realization when I visited the United Nations for the first time, the United Nations building in New York. You go to most places like that, big organizations, whether it's like a museum or, someplace in Washington, like the Smithsonian or whatever, they all have these gift shops. But at the United Nations, they have a grift shop. That's right. You can buy items to promote the United Nations, and it's all about the grift. That really is all of what it's about.
I'm glad you stretched that joke out a couple more lines so I could grab that drop for you. All right. We got a lot. We got more to cover here. Speaking of COP30, it's been a bad start for the United Nations COP30 conference. And actually, well, kind of bad news. Of those of you who like the royal family and had high hopes for Prince William and future Prince William, future King William, and King Kate or Queen Kate being a little better on the climate issue than their old man, I have bad news for you. Andy, why don't you go ahead and play this video of one of the opening speeches at COP30 by one Prince William.
All of us here today understand that we are edging dangerously close to the Earth's critical tipping points, thresholds beyond which the natural systems we depend on may begin to unravel. The melting of polar ice, the loss of the Amazon, the disruption of ocean currents. These are not distant threats. They are fast approaching and will affect every one of us, no matter where we live. Communities around the world are already facing rising seas, extreme heat, wildfires, floods, droughts, and increasing frequency of extreme weather.
Now, I must go straight to the Archbishop of Canterbury, who I believe is a subject of the crown, to break down for us which one of those claims that Prince William put forward are true and which are false.
Well, first, you're wrong. I'm not a subject of the crown. I'm a American citizen, so I'm part of a republic, not a democracy, by the way, a republic. Look, I'm torn between thinking, God, I like the monarchy for others, but they need a new house. The House of Windsor is spent here in England. It's time for a change because these guys don't ever learn. But then at the same time, I'm thinking, well, hold it. If he's right, everyone's going to be affected. I'm well situated for when the oceans rise. I've got property that could become oceanfront property. I mean, it's hundreds of miles from the ocean now, but if the seas rise enough, I might be well situated for the beachfront property. Maybe I should buy some stuff in Arizona and wait for California to go under. Climate change. It's not all bad. No, it's just these tipping points. Look, we've covered this multiple times. We've got, I forget how many shows. What show are we on? 160 more. We've got
181.
181. We probably covered tipping points in 40 to 60 of those shows at one point or the other. They can't identify a single tipping point that's actually tipped. And it's a tipping point is not just reaching something, but it's once you've gone over it, once you've reached it, it has a cascading effect impacting all these other things. They can't identify one that's having cascading effects. They've made hundreds of predictions over the years. Not a single one's been right. And yet we still listen to clowns like this.
Yeah.
Not listen to them. I'm not sure we're all listening to them, but we have to, the media keeps inflicting them upon us.
Yes. And so we must inflict it upon our poor audience, poor suffering audience here.
That's right,
but,
Jim.
Look, there's a few more aspects of this about being a bad start I want to get to. There's a story here from Reuters, and then we can throw it to more panelists here. And more bad news going into the big confab down there in Brazil. Headline is EU agrees weakened climate target in final hour deal for COP30. So this is really more expected. This is more reality hitting the global greenies in the face. Let me read a little bit from it. EU climate ministers agreed to a 2040 climate change target in the early hours of Wednesday after watering down the goal in last-minute negotiations as they raced to clinch the deal before the UN COP30 summit in Brazil. After negotiating late into Tuesday night, climate ministers from European Union countries approved in a public vote a compromise to cut emissions 90% by 2040 from 1990 levels, but with flexibilities to weaken this aim. The weakened target would let countries buy foreign carbon credits, yay, to cover up to 5% of the 90% emissions cutting goal. That would effectively weaken to 85% the emissions cuts required from European industries and pay foreign countries to cut emissions on Europe's behalf to make up the rest. The EU also agreed to consider the option in the future to use international carbon credits to meet a further 5% of the 2040 emissions reductions, potentially shaving another 5% off the domestic target. Quote, setting a climate target is not just picking a number. It is a political decision with far-reaching consequences for the continent, said Danish Climate Minister Lars Aagaard. Quote, therefore, we have also worked to provide comfort that it can be reached in a way that preserves competitiveness, social balance, and security. The story also notes that in their wisdom, Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary are completely opposed to this whole thing and will not participate. Yet the rest of Europe keeps going.
No, two other countries abstained.
That's good. I mean, maybe it's getting up there. But Myron, the idea that this that these numbers are meaningful and we're not just pulled out of the air when they can basically just change them on a whim at any time they want and act like it's meaningful.
Yeah, well, you're right, Jim. On the one hand, it's all pretend, but on the other hand, they're destroying their economy, right? Look, the German automakers went along, they buckled under, or they went along with the idea that all vehicles that are going to be sold in a few years are going to be electric. And now they're finding out, oh my God, what have we done? How much money are we going to lose? And it turns out that Chinese EVs are, affordable and German ones are not. So, Germany's economy depends on autos and chemicals, and both of those are energy intensive. And the product of the auto industry, cars, use a lot of energy. So it's all pretend, and they live in a fantasy world, but they're destroying their economy through these fantasies.
Yeah, for sure. I want to bring up
they even backed off the electric automobile goal because they said they changed it so part of the green credits could be met by sustainable fuel automobiles that could run. So long as we're destroying rainforest in developing countries to plant palm seed oil so we can make biodiesel for our engines here in the West, that's going to count as towards our emissions goals and our meeting our standards.
And in America, we have the huge ethanol mandates still.
Yeah. So
which is another scam.
It's all a scam. And if you look at what they just agreed to, they not only up to another 10% could be offset, but they said, and also we're going to look at it in the future. And if we have to, we can make adjustments. So they adjust it down to 70% or 60% when they start butting up against the high cost, butting up more than they already are against the high cost of their plans.
Yeah, this has been going on now. This is what, COP 30? So that means they've had 30 of these meetings. And it's the same story every time, as captured by our friend in the UK, Cartoons by Josh. This week is Hot Topic. Where's my money? Is there money available? Send us more money. It's all about the money. And it just keeps going on and on and on and on. They've had 30 conferences now, and the planet is still doomed, according to them. They've not accomplished one damn thing.
And global emissions keep going up as well. Nothing has changed, and mostly because of China, but because of everyone else as well. And while we still have that up here, I want to, speaking of, some of our comments are saying get a real job. These are two of our friends and our streaming partner from CFACT. They're on their way to COP 30, and thanks to the government shutdown, lots of flights were delayed or canceled, and so this is how much dedication our friends at CFACT have to get down there to COP 30 and to be the only voices of reason to the globe. So I actually recognize both of those gentlemen. I will not embarrass them by saying their names, but you know who you are, and Myra knows who they are, and everyone here knows who they are.
Jim,
they've been guests on this show before. They have.
Jim, we should have put a little like donate now to say so many of CFACT individuals are suffering cold and without a home.
Cup 30 refugees.
Yeah, and put in the arms of an angel over it. And
oh my gosh, yes, this is a future meme. I actually really admire our friends at CFAC for employing homeless people in the organization. That's really big of them. All right.
What I don't understand is, since all these people get so much oil money, why they just didn't go to the oil barons club at the airport? You know.
Let me say one last thing about COP 30 and all the COPs. It's come full circle now. Remember, the whole UN Framework Convention on Climate Change began in Brazil, not in Berlin, but in Brazil, in Rio, back in 1990 under George H.W. Bush. We signed on to a treaty. They've signed multiple treaties and agreements since then. Every one of them set different goals. Not a single treaty's goals, not one, has been met. We didn't become carbon neutral by 2000, which was the first goal. We didn't cut 7% below 2005 levels by 2015, the second goal. You know, you pick your target. We did 2015. We haven't met the Paris Agreement goals. Not a single agreement. The world continues apace. Fewer people are dying from extreme weather than ever before. Fewer people are starving than ever before. There's not a single city that they predicted would be swamped has been swamped. The Arctic is not ice-free. Polar bears populations are expanding. The point is, the agreements fail and climate is not destroyed. And the agreements are just words on paper, because no country has met their goals.
Yep. Cool.
We're back in Rio and we're back in Brazil and nothing's changed.
Yep. All right. Let's move on to our main topic, as we do want to save time for Q&A, which is a wonderful part of this program, especially for all the wonderful people in the chat. And it's our main topic, talking about climate, energy, and the election, which is one of many reasons we have Myron E. Bell on the program with us today, because he spent his entire career pretty much in Washington, D.C. dealing with climate, energy, and elections and politics. So we're going to look at this from two sides. One of the alarmist press, one of the stories, I should say, in the climate alarmist press, E&E News /Politico, takes a certain, let's just say it takes a certain viewpoint on it, and we'll have a look at that. This is from E&E News. Democrats ride energy issues to election sweep. And they write, Tuesday's elections delivered Democrats something more than a pair of governor's mansions. It offered them a midterm strategy. The party swept Virginia and New Jersey's marquee gubernatorial elections, along with important down-ballot races in Pennsylvania and Georgia, after months of hammering a cost of living message that tied Republicans to soaring electricity bills. The GOP bet big on energy politics, too, with Republican campaigns pouring millions of dollars into energy-focused ads, while President Donald Trump used his bully pulpit to argue, quote, in all caps, a Democrat vote means doubling and even tripling of your energy bills, unquote. The results? Decisive Republican losses in every state that held major elections. New Jersey Democrats will have a mandate to test a controversial rate freeze for electricity prices after Representative Mikey Sherrill scored a wider than expected victory. Virginia Democrats will have the power to resume the state's climate policies after 4 years of gridlock, because Abigail Spanberger, the incoming governor, defeated Winsome Earl Sears. Pennsylvania Democrats retained 3 state Supreme Court justices, maintaining the party's 5-2 majority as the High Court considers a pivotal climate case. And by winning 2 seats on the Public Service Commission, Georgia Democrats gained their first toehold in state government in nearly a generation. Climate hawks argue those results, plus judge elections in PA and public and PSC races in Georgia, demonstrate Trump's attacks on renewable energy have transformed energy into a new Republican vulnerability. And this story also notes that the League of Conservation Voters spent $7 million across Virginia, New Jersey, and Georgia, focused on energy affordability, and they were blaming Donald Trump for the rising prices. I'll start with you, Myron. I'm sure we all have something to weigh in on here, but what do you make of that spin on the election results from on Tuesday?
Well, there's a lot to unpack here, Jim. For context, remember, in these odd off-year elections that several states hold, and particularly New Jersey and Virginia, voters there have to suffer. They have an election every year. At least most states, it's only even numbered years. Usually the party that won the previous election, the presidential election, loses in Virginia, New Jersey, and not always, but usually. And so that it's no surprise that the Democrats won the governorship. But also, these are both Democratic states. Virginia used to be kind of go back and forth, but they're both heavily Democratic states. So also, the Republicans this time didn't run very good campaigns, or maybe they didn't have very good candidates. I don't know, but they didn't run very good campaigns. So what strikes me about what's totally wrong about this article is that climate was not an issue. The Democrats never brought it up. It's that energy costs are too high. Well, why are energy costs too high? It's because of the climate policies pursued not only at the federal level, but particularly by Democratic states like New Jersey and Virginia. So these people, I think, one other point about this is Trump has not used energy as an issue very well. It was a big issue in the 24 campaign. But what he said was, I'm going to cut your energy costs in half. Well, if gasoline prices went down by half, all the oil producers in this country would stop drilling. Because in fact, if gasoline was $1.75 a gallon, 50, 60 cents of that is already taxed, federal tax and state tax, and some places local tax. And electric rates are based on a whole lot of things, but they're controlled by the state government and the state public utility commissions. And these states that pursue these climate policies, like New Jersey and Virginia, rates are going to go up. There's no doubt about it. So Governor-elect Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, her whole campaign was based on, we got to get electric rates down, they're too high. Well, her policies, the ones she supported, are the ones that have caused electric rates to go up, but they're going to go up more. So she didn't mention climate at all. So climate, has never been a popular issue because the public doesn't believe in it and isn't interested in it. But the Democrats keep pursuing very expensive climate policies. And when Obama was first elected, he didn't run on climate at all. But as soon as he got in, he said, well, this is about the climate. That's what government is for, is to save us from climate change. So this is this article is deeply confused, but it's the narrative that the Democrats are going to use, is that the Republicans are responsible for high energy prices. No, it's Democratic legislators and governors that are mostly responsible for high electric rates.
Yeah, don't leave out the members of the Democrats on public utility commissions across the country as well.
But let's look at that, because I agree with Myron a lot. I disagree to some extent. So where I agree with him is that it was Democratic policies that did this. But look, Virginia had a Republican governor. The Georgia, the entire PUC was Republican. You got rhino Republicans who believe in all of the above. So they're going to move more wind and more solar. Virginia's governor, great guy on a lot of things, but he was bought and paid for by Dominion with offshore wind. It's the only state that has offshore wind that said to the utility building the offshore wind, no matter the cost, you can pass it on. Every other state, the utility, the people constructing the wind farm had to come in and make the case, and then they've had to come back and adjust that case, but not in good old the Dominion state. There, they just get to pass it on regardless of the cost. So Republicans have screwed the pooch on this too. They did it in Georgia. Georgia's cost went up. Why? They support wind and solar too. got to have that wind and solar. So it was hard for them to make the case, especially in Georgia, that we're not responsible for your rates. They were all Republicans. Of course they're responsible. So the Democrats understood that people cared about their energy prices.
Yeah.
The Republicans didn't understand or failed to point out, you're right. They could have said, you're right, energy prices are too high, but it's your policies as opposed to doubling down on some of the same policies that have caused it.
But Sterling, look, that's true. But in fact, all of the political muscle behind these policies comes from the left. Yes, there are weak-minded and weak-willed Republicans who supported it. But in fact, to put an exclamation point on your argument, Texas started this all under Governor George W. Bush in 1999 and 2000, when Ken Lay of Enron, his big financial backer, convinced him to go big on wind. So Texas is now the largest producer of wind and solar in the country, and has got huge federal subsidies from taxpayers in other states to do it. I mean, it's very cynical. But I want to go back to Virginia. Governor Youngkin was a mixed bag. He got Virginia. He tried to get Virginia out of RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and he pursued some very sensible policies, some of which he couldn't get through the legislature. The Dominion thing is an example of what the problem is in a lot of states, which is the big utilities control the state legislature on electricity policy. And that doesn't matter whether the governor is Republican or Democrat, conservative or leftist. They just control it. So I think, but look, we have to go back to the 2 points I want to make again are climate had nothing to do with this. Nobody brought it up. And secondly, the Democrats won by claiming that the Republicans were responsible for high electric rates and high gas prices. Well, everything that the Trump administration is trying to do is to lower gas prices and keep electric rates down and keep the grid operating and not have blackouts. So,
but that's the thing. Winsome Earl Sears could have said, Republicans aren't to blame for high energy cost in Virginia. In fact, the legislature blocked a good policy, and that would have lowered our cost. If we'd never joined RGGI, we wouldn't have had. That was under Democrats. Let's blame high energy prices are a problem, but it's Democrats who are to blame. They didn't make that case.
They didn't run very good campaigns. I mean, I don't know about Virginia. In New Jersey, it was always an uphill struggle for Cheddarelli, but he's a kind of liberal Republican who actually supported most of these things. So that's
us. We accept all the above. We're concerned about climate too. Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the first of all, I want to say to our audience who are watching here on YouTube, Anthony Watts is dropped off our stream, but not because he was mad or anything or upset or or nobody hit him with a with a weapon or anything. But they're working on the broadband in his neighborhood, and somebody probably just cut the line by accident. So if he could come back on, he will be back on before the end of it here. But there's another way to look at this. Well, first of all, there was a story. You don't have to bring this one up, Andy, but from the Daily Signal, the current director of the Virginia Department of Energy said that if Abigail Spanberger in Virginia wants to restore the Democrat agenda on energy in the state, and the director of the Department of Energy in Virginia said, if that happens, that's actually going to cause 2.1 billion more pounds of CO2 emissions than the current policy that they have right now. But a more realistic political look at this came from the Daily Caller with the headline, East Coast energy radicals who campaigned on affordability are set to blow up utility bills. And the money quote in here from our friend Jason Isaac at the American Energy Institute, who's also been on this program. He said of the election results, quote, "This is bad news for affordable energy. With climate-obsessed Democrats taking full control in Virginia, expect a return to costly net zero mandates that raise electric bills and drive industry out of the state. In New Jersey, Governor-elect Mikey Sherrill will continue the state's push for climate-driven energy policies that make power less reliable and more expensive. The message is clear. Energy costs will rise, reliability will fail, and working families will pay the price. Linnea, it seems very strange that that very commonsensical and true message was not able to get through to voters in those states because it's plainly obvious.
Yeah, well, the exit polling from those races said that most of the people, even in states where they said that they thought their economy was doing well, they said that the economy was the biggest thing on their minds, which is often the case in American elections. But the East Coast states have put themselves where they are over the last couple decades. They block pipelines. They don't want cheap energy, it seems. And the voters don't seem to want it either, since they consistently vote for people who are against cheap energy, or at least who are either misinformed or too dumb to understand that, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and energy prices are increasing, maybe try something different and see if that doesn't switch things up a little bit. But I mean, since Trump came into office, or even really since Trump was elected, oil prices have been coming down, much to the concern in some cases with some big dips from my friends who still work in the industry, because those big dips always mean layoffs. So they weren't too happy with that. But it has been coming down. But East Coast and I think West Coast, probably Washington, California, Oregon, they have not seen significant declines in their prices, but that's all just their own state's problem. So this is just, Democrats will look at the reality around them, that their prices are increasing as they have done more and more of this green energy policy stuff. And then they'll see that the prices are going up, and then they say, well, more windmills, because wind is free. Therefore, it should be less expensive, right? And there's just no connection being made, and their politicians aren't interested in teaching them that they're incorrect in that assumption. So, because they're after the graft, and they're after which wind turbines and solar are. I've compared them in the past to fast fashion, which, if people aren't familiar with that term, it is clothing that's made really cheaply, and it's not intended to last forever. They're well aware that you're going to throw it out and buy new ones. And that's basically what solar panels and wind turbines are. They know that they're not going to last the amount of time that they say they're going to last. They know that they're going to have to either be gotten rid of, or more land devoted to more of them to replace them. And the companies that are building these things, China especially, is going to benefit from putting in more of these things. So there's really no incentive. And Democrats will say forever to their constituents that, oh, well, if it's the same thing with like the old communists in the Soviet Union. Well, it's not that our policies are the problem. It's that people are sabotaging our policies somehow. Therefore, we have to keep doing what we're doing, and eventually it'll work.
Linnea is right, but it's not that they don't understand that continuing the same policies will continue the same results. You get higher and higher prices. It's that they learned from Orwell. Look, war is peace. Orwell wrote, "War is peace." Well, they write something that clearly costs more. High energy policies will result in low prices. I mean, high energy cost policies will now result, and in fact, they're already resulting in lower prices if you only recognized it. So let's continue on the same course. Let's expand our policies that put us in the situation that you're complaining about, because really it's helping. You don't get it, but we understand. Look, New Jersey, there was no question who was in charge of New Jersey. Democrats run it before, and they still run it. They ran on high energy prices that they created. And they said, oh, if we only stay the course, if we only expand the wind and solar that we've already pushed for faster than most other states, well, it'll solve the problem we created by doing the same thing over and over again. They're not stupid. It's not that they don't understand it. is that it's newsthink. It's newsthink.
Yeah. Well, you know what we need? You know what would be really helpful? If we had a whole video series on energy. Maybe we should do something like that.
If only.
If only. Actually, no, that was, yes. We're actually working on a whole, in 2026, we're going to have a whole, like we used to do the Climate at a Glance video series starring Linnea Lueken. We're going to have a series of energy videos also starring Linnea Lueken. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be doing previews of that in early 2026. But now it is going to be time for Q&A. We have so many questions already queued up. But before we get to that, a quick word from our sponsor, the sponsor of the Climate Realism Show, and that is Advisor Metals. You know, if you listen to a lot of conservative shows and streams like I do, you hear tons of pitches for buying gold, silver, and other precious metals. There are so many companies out there. But we want to tell you why you should trust the sponsor of this program, Advisor Metals, and it is the man who runs the company who we trust, Ira Brashatsky. Ira is the managing member of Advisor Metals, and he does not employ those high-pressure tactics or the deceptive marketing ploys you see from a lot of those in big gold. He also doesn't deal in so-called rare coins. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you are dealing in quality bullion, and that is so much better when the time comes to liquidate this very valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, your investment will be sent discreetly, directly to your own home. Also, Ira is advertising on this program because he is an America First patriot. He does not donate to Democrats. He refuses to work with the proxies of the Chinese Communist Party. And he, like us, abhor the machinations and schemes of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. That makes us very proud to have him as our sponsor. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio, if you want to back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals, please go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. You can leave your information there and Ira will be in contact and make the whole process so very easy for you. Again, climaterealismshow.com/metals. And also be sure to tell them who sent you, because that helps us and this program while you're helping your financial future. All right. Thank you so much for your attention to this matter. And we are ready for Q&A. Take it away, Linnea.
Alrighty. Okay. Let's see here. We've got a whole lot of great questions today. And unfortunately, Anthony has been sabotaged by someone, cut his internet feed, but hopefully we can get him back. But if not, we might not have the best answers to some of the science questions that we possibly could, but we will do our best. All right. So Rick Harris has a question here. His question is slightly sarcastic, but I'm going to put it up anyway. He says, one of my cats creates a lot of methane. Should I put her down or buy more air freshener?
Door number 2.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you could change your diet too, right? I wouldn't go to all vegetables, but you might see, you might do that.
I used to give my dog some of the like extra eggs from my chickens, and that was a terrible, terrible situation. Do not feed your dogs eggs unless they stay outside or something. All right. Ian McMillan says, have any of the alarmist predictions come true?
Not that I'm aware of. The closest of all the predictions that I've seen come true was Arctic sea ice. It dropped precipitously shortly after they started predicting that by 2050 it would disappear. It dropped precipitously from highs that it reached in the 70s when they first started measuring, by the way. But then it stabilized. So as far as I can tell, not a single of their predictions has come true.
Myron, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think the problem here is that for those Americans or citizens of any country who actually get their news from the corrupt mainstream media, which thank God fewer and fewer people are paying attention to, they would say, well, all of their predictions are coming true or have come true. And because we get those headlines all the time. So as your weekly climate science updates show. So I think the problem is that there's a real disconnect between what's actually happened with the climate since the global warming debate got going in the late 1980s and what the public has been led to believe. I think the good news is fewer and fewer people read the mainstream media or watch it. And second, the ridiculous claims of catastrophe, quite more and more people have noticed that they haven't come true. And so I think that they have the desperation to sell their agenda has meant that they've made more and more obviously ridiculous claims. And people over time are seeing that these claims are ridiculous and haven't come true. So I think, we've been helped, in fact, on our side by these wild predictions about the future. Manhattan's going to be underwater in a few years, for example. I mean, many of us may hope that Manhattan will be underwater, but it hasn't happened.
Well, if it happens under Mandami, we'll blame him.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, I mean,
socialism brought the seas into New York.
Yeah, I mean, we're all friends with Dr. Roy Spencer at the University of Alabama Huntsville, and he has that famous graph that he shares all the time of all of the computer models over the decades, and then the real temperature. And another graph, I think one model that goes back 20 years is even close to the actual temperature, and it happens to come from Russia of all places. So. So maybe that prediction is close to being true, but all of the catastrophic ones are false and have been for decades. And so that's what this show is here to point out.
All righty. If only they had banned those pizza ovens, then New York would not be underwater.
Exactly.
That's true.
Wheelman says, why did the continental glaciers that reached Wisconsin collapse? No SUVs back then. That would have been an Anthony question, I think. But in general, natural fluctuations in our Earth's average temperature and in regional temperatures.
Yeah, I think the Milankovitch cycles and things like that, and the ice. Look, we're still in an ice age, and we have been for millions of years. It's cooler than it was for millions and millions of years before that. But the extent of the ice waxes and wanes on large cycles, hundreds. Typically, the ice expands for 100,000 years or more, about 80 to 150,000 years. And then you have what we refer to as interglacials, short interglacials that last 10 to 18,000 years or so. And we're in one of those right now. But I guarantee, I won't be around. None of us will be around. But my suspicion is that the next ice age will come regardless of our best efforts. And so why they retreated before had nothing to do with emission levels or CO2 levels. And when they come back, it will have nothing to do with CO2 levels. They won't be held back by CO2 levels.
Absolutely. All right. We have Chris Nisbet, who is a frequent viewer of ours, says, I always struggle to understand the motivations of people like Prince William. Are they just poorly informed? Jim, what do you think?
I used to think that they were poorly informed. I mean, people like Prince William, he's, you think about his life, he has no reason to actually immerse himself into these subjects the way we do out of just natural curiosity and also our jobs. But I can't ascribe it to ignorance anymore. It is not hard to educate yourself on the very basics of this. And you only have to start with what the predictions were 20 years ago when he was a little boy and what the reality is right now. For him to stand in front of COP30 and to predict this parade of horribles and that we're losing sea ice and all this stuff, that storms are getting stronger. You literally only have to go to the Climate at a Glance book that we put out, or just ask Grok and they will direct you to it as well, I hear these days. And you'll see that, the severity of storms is not increasing. The number of hurricanes is not increasing. That there's no trend in any of these horrible things that they're predicting are going to come true or are happening now. there are no climate refugees. This is all myth. And so I don't ascribe it. I'm not so innocent in my assessment of that anymore. I think it's malicious at this point because there is no excuse to be ignorant on these very basic scientific topics.
Anybody else?
Well, look, for hundreds of years,
what else is there to say?
Yeah, no, there really isn't.
Hundreds of years, people like that lived in a world where there were the elites and there were serfs, and there was no middle class. There were really poor people, and they were completely dependent on you because you could wipe them out if they didn't do what you wanted them to do. Now we have laws that restrict that kind of thing, and they'd like to go back. They think there are too many of the peons, but those peons have power, and they don't like it. I think William would long for the day when the king had real power, that he wasn't controlled by parliament or a prime minister. They're largely out of politics. They're mouthpieces for the present administration and parliament over there in England. In fact, let's say parliament came to him or the prime minister came to him and said, here's who we want you to nominate for knighthood. Could he refuse? I don't think so. I think they long for the day when they had real power, not real money. A lot of people have money. Bill Gates has money. Jeff Bezos has money. What they don't have is the ability to look out and command people to build them a fortress. You will do this or we will throw you in the stocks. Back in the old days, they could.
Let me give everybody an Anthony Watts connection update. He said he walked down the street to where the workers accidentally severed the fiber in his neighborhood, and they said it could be back on in as early as 15 minutes by the time he walked back home. So he may join us for the last few seconds of this show. Who knows?
Possibly. All right, that's pretty funny. Alan Griffiths wants to know if there's any update available on Mark Stein's health, and what is Michael Mann doing now? Why isn't he behind bars? Do we have any updates?
I don't have an update. Michael, on Mark Stein. I mean, the last I heard, he's still has very serious health problems, but he continues to do a lot. But Michael Mann, moved from Penn State to the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League university. He's resigned as director of his little center that he created for climate propaganda because, as he said, he wants to be able to speak more freely in the political realm and, slander us and trash people. But the interesting thing, of course, is that National Review agreed to drop its suit, and Michael Mann agreed to pay for the legal costs that were awarded once the judge read the trial transcript and realized that Michael Mann and his lawyer had lied under oath to get that huge settlement, which was reduced down to almost nothing. And but also CEI has not dropped their suit, and they are still litigating Michael Mann, and they have also been awarded several $100,000 in legal fees for essentially Michael Mann wasting the court's time for years and costing the defendants, I think, if you add it all up, it's well over $1 million in legal fees. So Michael Mann is still, he's got a new book out. I think you should all not order it, but if you can pick up a free copy at the library, you might want to, exit out or something, accept the pages, or underline the parts that are true. But that'll be much shorter. You might. Anthony can read Michael Mann's book, and he can underline the parts that are true and send it around, and it'll be a couple few lines maybe.
What makes you think I want to read his book?
Well, I'm not going to read it, so I thought somebody's got to read it.
Oh, right, yeah.
Why?
So Nikki, the sacrificial lamb.
Well, yeah, all those nice trees. that were used on that. Welcome back, Anthony. We're glad.
Yeah,
we're glad that
the
you're back.
AT&T people were down the street working on the fiber, and they blew a splice. Apparently, I walked down and talked to them. They said I'd be back soon. So I walked home, grabbed a cup of coffee, and boom, it was back.
See, it pays to go speak to the manager. Apparently,
Yeah.
Your internet does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dwayne Manzel, sorry if I mispronounced that, Dwayne, who says, what happened to the mad climate science lady from the University of Texas? I haven't heard from her lately. I'm not sure who he's responding or who he's asking about.
Is that Catherine Hayhoe? I think she's Texas Tech.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the only person he could be talking about.
I haven't heard from her in a long time.
No.
I don't know what she's doing.
She recently was quoted in one of the stories about something recently. I saw her, but her commentary was so insignificant. I can't even remember what it was about.
Yeah, she said she's got Trump derangement syndrome, and she was quoting one of those stories. There's also a mad one at A&M. I think Dessler is at A&M. So they're still out there. But, look, if you know anything about Texas, they've changed the university standards here in Texas. And I think some university professors are keeping their head down a bit.
Yeah. So we have two questions related to the Ford. I want to, and it's actually, I think it's both from the same person. I think he just has a different username for YouTube and for Rumble. But here, DJ Bo says, did anyone see they canceled the Form Ohm 150? And then the other question he posted was, did you see that they canceled the Ohm 150? Apparently it's been met with a lot of resistance, which is a good joke. Yeah. Thank you, Bogus. All right. I did not see that they totally canceled it. I knew that they were significantly reducing the number that they were making a couple of years ago even. But I guess if they've totally canceled it, then cool. I don't think I've seen any on the road.
I did see the Ford F-150 Lightning is no longer going to be produced.
Yeah. I
They
saw a
found out
Rivian
resistance
recently.
was futile.
Yeah, resistance was futile. All right. Keith Dunbar, who I think I've seen you in the chat before, Keith, but I don't think I've gotten a question from you before, says, how many bison roamed the U.S. before 1776? That start date might be not the right one to go from.
Well, let me say this. How about we play a little game here? I saw that in the queued up as a question, and I asked Grok, which that's the AI I go with instead of ChatGPT. Right. And I asked them how many bison roamed the earth basically before 1776. So let's go around the horn. Well, what is your number?
What did you say the earth? Did you say the earth?
Or North America? Yes. North America.
Okay.
I got 30 to 60 million in my search just now.
Well, Anthony, the whole point of the game was to guess, not look it up. I looked it up. Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry. I misunderstood the question.
Definitely tens of millions.
I'm still reeling from my internet outage and being hyped up on coffee.
Yeah. I was going to guess 50 million because that's the number I've heard repeatedly. And I actually care about bison. So I looked into it. I heard 50 million.
So yeah, Grok says between 30 and 60. So there you go.
And was that only before? It's just that I think that the numbers are different depending on like this. I don't like the framing of this question because the framing of the question is that the bison were exclusively all wiped out because of the origin of the country, and I don't think that that's the right framing.
Well, I'm not convinced. First off, I'd say the 50 million I've heard of are typically the plains bison.
Yeah.
So the western bison in the in the United States, they don't typically count the woodland bison, which were in Alaska and Canada. But there were also bison in the east. There's a reason why buffalo is called buffalo. There used to be buffalo there. But I think the best evidence is it's certainly Europeans that are largely responsible for the destruction of the bison, both inadvertently through habitat change, but also as a matter of policy to control the Plains Indians. They did go out with shooting parties, just shooting and leaving dead bison everywhere, and it was a policy of the U.S. government to do so to control the Plains Indians. It happened. They were saved by private parties that wanted a few of them around in Texas and a little bit up near Yellowstone. So that was largely policy. I mean, yeah, there were random hunting. There's no question there was hunting, but they left them to rot. The Indians contributed once they got horses and guns. There are places across the West called buffalo jumps where they drove hundreds and thousands of buffalo over cliffs. And it said, oh, well, the Native Americans, they used every part. Well, every part that they got of the bison they got to before they rotted. Yeah. They go to one bison and they'd get the fur and they'd make the teepees and they'd do the leather and they might get 10 or 15 before the rest of them all rotted. So let's not pretend that they didn't have a role, but it was conscious policy that wiped them out.
We have a follow-up question that's very important. That is from Scott Clay, who says, "Did they get carbon credits for wiping out the bison?"
Yeah.
I
What other show would spend 4 minutes talking about the historic bison population?
I'm
of North
sorry,
America?
Jim. I'm sorry. I wanted to get to that question. Okay. All right. We'll move along.
Before we go on, I want to make a comparison here. They're talking about 30 to 60. That's not the one. The next one I posted. I wanted to point out that compared to the 30 to 60 million bison that are out there, today we have somewhere in around 87 to 90 million cattle. And so, 30 to 60 million, it's an estimate. But the point is that we had bison up to 60 million way back when, and it didn't cause, catastrophic warming from methane. And so now we've got cattle. Maybe we've got a little bit more than bison, but it's still, we're not seeing any catastrophic warming. The whole argument is moot.
But also cattle, though, the way they actually, modern cattle, their digestive systems don't work exactly the same way bisons do. Bisons are a little bit more efficient at converting grass to meat as opposed to methane. Don't get me on bison, man. I'm the only one here that's got a bison hanging on his wall and got bison meat in his freezer. I care about bison.
He's world's biggest bison fan. All right. Walter asks, and this is for you, Myron, since Bill Gates delivered a self-inflicted blow to the climate alarmists, isn't now the time to deliver the knockout punch by rescinding the endangerment finding?
Absolutely. And I think, as I think you've covered this, all the groups on the right have virtually all the groups on the right, starting with Heartland and CEI, have been promoting and pushing for repealing the endangerment finding, and EPA is in the process of doing that. So I think we all need to get behind it and support it. There are a lot of legal hurdles, technical hurdles to getting rid of it, but they have gotten started very quickly. In Trump 2, they put it off, and the EPA administrators in Trump 1 just kept telling the White House, no, we don't want to do that. We don't need to do that. It's too hard. But Trump 1, they started on day one with the president's executive order, and they're moving ahead. So absolutely. I think one other thing that we ought to be doing, and to go back to when we were talking about energy as an election issue, everybody should be looking and seeing what their gas tax is in their state. In California now, it's 71 cents a gallon. So, but even New Jersey, it's 45 cents. So one thing in New Jersey, now that Governor-elect Sherrill has made energy a big issue, should be asking her to why don't you support lowering the gas tax in New Jersey? That's one way to get gasoline prices down. And even Republican states, some of them have high gas taxes. So I think this should be a real issue. And there have been bills introduced, just one today in Wisconsin, to put the taxes as a sticker on the gas pump. And I think Heartland has supported that in the past in the state ALEC organization. it would really help if people knew how much they were paying for in taxes as the total cost of their energy bill.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. I like that idea. All right, this one's for you, Anthony. This should be a knockout quick one for you. Nothing as it seems says a 2025 Dutch study showed no widespread acceleration. 95% of the 204 long-term tide gauge locations showed no statistically significant acceleration in sea level rise. Is the satellite data wrong?
Well, let's see. I'm going to channel the McLaughlin group here and go, wrong! It's wrong because not the individual satellites, but because they spliced together these 4 different data sets that started in the early 90s to now, and they keep changing the satellite, keep changing the instrument, and each data set had a slight little bend to it. Our Willis Etchenbach over at What's Up With That figured this out, and he was able to show that, yes, there is a minor acceleration in the data, but when you break it apart into the different satellite data sets, each set of years, you find that there's no individual acceleration each of those. But because each one's slightly biased, and it always seems to always go towards the worst side of things, you splice them all together and you get a slight acceleration. So it's not real. It's not real. And the tide gauges have been around much longer. The tide gauges show, a very, very slow, mild change in sea level coming out of the Little Ice Age, which is to be expected. There's nothing to be alarmed about regarding sea level rise.
And regarding the satellites, they have an error bar around their mean sea level rise that's larger than the amount of sea level rise they're predicting. So it's 3 millimeters a year, plus or minus something like 3 millimeters a year. So they could have no sea level rise, or they could be 6 millimeters a year, depending on where you go with the error bar. The tide gauge, it's not. They're measuring, of course, from space to degrees that I don't think are adequate. The tide gauge data is better.
I want to get Myron's thoughts on this question. From La Raza for Trump. Is legal action required to bring balance to schools? They are weaponizing the youth with this climate alarmism. It's abuse.
That's too big an issue for this program at this point, I think, to talk about. I mean, our education system, there is a reason why more and more parents take on the burden of educating their children at home. And that's because our schools have become not very good at educating and really great at promoting propaganda to young impressionable minds. I think we all have thoughts. We've had children go through schools, and it's gotten worse and worse. And I think the answer has got to be more and more homeschooling until the public schools say, cry uncle and say, well, we can't keep going in this direction. I don't know. It's very discouraging to me, and I don't even want to really get started in this discussion.
Yeah, there's a lot that needs to be done. Probably just tear the whole thing down, honestly.
Well, look, we went more than 150 years without a Department of Education. And since we've federalized part of the education, test scores and everything have gone down. We've universalized science education with the national next generation science standards. It's made things worse. So the first thing is to close the Department of Education, to just end that entirety. We didn't need it. It's not delegated to the federal government in the Constitution of the United States, and it shouldn't exist. And then you'd have to work at the state level. My suspicion is that some states are a lot better than others on that.
All right. Wheelman asks, I know natural variation caused the ice sheets to collapse, but if the ice sheet collapsed due to natural variation, then how is what is happening now not natural variation?
Yes.
Like Yeah. I guess the question could be, how do we know what like percentage of it is due to natural versus any potential anthropogenic influence?
No one's got a clue. I'll be frank. They don't know how much of it's natural variation. They can't, and they don't even want to look for it. That's the biggest problem. All of the studies related to natural variation went out the window when there was big money in chasing carbon dioxide. That's really what's happened. And so, yeah, there's some portions natural variation. Man might have a microscopic, minuscule effect on it, but they don't really know.
That can't be right, Anthony. I read in the newspapers every day that climate change is causing this stuff.
Well, I can't tell you what to do except maybe don't read the New York Times.
Yeah, and this is along the similar lines. Above Us Only Sky says, what caused the Laurentide ice sheet to melt? Was it CO2?
No, it was a change in precession. Now that was natural variation. The bison were not driving SUVs across the plains at that time. And so that was a big natural variation event. And there's all kinds of theories as to what caused it, change in precession of Earth's orbit, some outgassing possible, maybe it contributed to it. They just don't know for sure, but for certain it was some kind of a natural event because humans weren't around much back then, and especially in North America, their impact was minuscule.
Alrighty. I don't know if we have the answer to this question from Kite Man Music, who says, will anything happen with the site of the COP30 meeting?
Well, I'd like to go down there and turn it into a resort. And I'd like to have a bar called the Aero Bar. And that would be a great draw, I think. But I think it'll probably just get turned into some sort of one of a few things will happen. Someone will try to develop it into something, or it will just be absorbed by the jungle.
Yeah, it'll be like the Olympic Park in China, falling apart in a few years. I heard.
Sorry, go ahead.
I heard that now that they didn't advertise this before, but evidently they're having to put up the delegates in so-called sex hotels. It's like, boy, that was a well thought out. Well, maybe they prefer it that way. I don't know. They are bureaucrats after all.
I was about to make a joke about the Olympics, but I think I'll leave that one. Yeah, I did read somewhere that the highway that they put in meeting was something that they had wanted to do for a while, put a highway there, but it kept either getting voted down or like they didn't have the funding for it or something with the government. And so they used this as the opportunity to finally do at least part of a road that they wanted to do for a long time. So I'm sure they'll have something that they can figure out with it. But this is the last question of the day, you guys. Thank you so much to everyone who asked questions. We love this segment, and I will hand it back to Jim.
Thanks, Linnea, and thank you very much, Myron E. Bell from the American Land Council, for being with us today. We hope to have you on again for too long. I also want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, the CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. Thank, as always, to our regular panelists and members of the show, H. Sterling Burnett, Linnea Lueken, and Anthony Watts. I'm going to remind you to always check out climaterealism.com, where you get the counterspin to the BS you get in the legacy media, climateataglance.com, where you get all the facts you need to competently debate a climate alarmist, energyaglance.com, and also go to heartland.org, where you can support this organization and also subscribe to our Climate Change Weekly newsletter. It was a pleasure to be on the show with all of you, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.